All right, so today we're talking about policies. First, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Matt Nepper. That's Jacob, that's Tim, that's Dylan, and Christian's hiding over there in the corner. So we're going to go through the different types of policies that you could possibly have, like throughout a business, in real life, how the government will affect you through different policies that they give you as a business, and then as you continue on. So what are policies? As I just said, like policies are basically guidelines or rules that you have to abide by, whether you're inside of an organization or an organization abiding by the government's rules. So as we continue to go through this, you'll see that there are different ways that the guidelines get provided and then how they're represented to different people or which ones are used. So first, we're going to go through the government policies. The government policies often have to do with regulation, tax, all sorts of things like minimum wage, like required hours. If you're 16, you can only work a certain amount of hours. So government policies are a little bit tricky, and you should, as a corporation, like go over those more often. The employee handbook is your best friend as an employee of one of these corporations, because everything that they put inside that handbook, after you sign your contract, like you are assigned to that. So whatever you sign is basically you're reliable for. As we continue, so equal opportunity is a big thing now in America. So equal opportunity starts with basically all races, genders, ethnicities, religions, everything in general. They're on equal playing ground. So as we continue to work through in 2018 now, all genders and everything like that are starting to get closer. During the equal opportunity movement, we had the Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, also this 1972 Equal Opportunities Act, and the 1990 Americans with Disability Act. These three acts all show how our country has continued to develop. Martin Luther King Jr. can be represented as one of the top people that has started the Equal Opportunity Act. Without him, we wouldn't. All right. Without Martin Luther King Jr., I don't know if we'd have equality at this point or to this stage. He enables people of what they would call minorities or protected groups to then succeed in different businesses and continue moving up the chain. Equal opportunity versus affirmative action, they're very similar in most ways, but what happened? Again? All right, so back to equal opportunity and affirmative action. So they're very similar in most ways, but equal opportunity really has to do with once you're inside the corporation and really applies to corporations that have 15 or more employees. Affirmative action is how you get to that point inside of a company or a university. They allow the minorities the ability to get there. So personal experience for myself, I believe that a couple of schools that I applied to back when we were senior or whatever in high school, I didn't get into because possibly like a minority might have gotten ahead of me, which I knew for a fact that one of my friends had a lesser SAT score than me, but he also did get into North Carolina, which I did. So commitment to diversity is a very important thing in all corporations now. Diversity has been proven to enhance cultures inside of, especially executive groups and all groups in general. They work together to get better results. Three of the biggest companies that I saw when I was researching this was Accenture, Novartis, and Comcast, which is also located over in Philadelphia. These three companies are really working very diligently to get more diverse groups inside of their corporation because they can see the potential. Grassroots Bellinger is court case that she believes that she got like wrongdoing because when she applied to Michigan, minorities got 20 extra points towards their applications rather than like the regular public or whoever else is not considered part of the minorities. And this is another personal thing. So in the middle is the CEO of the company that I started with, the kid on the right, who also is Mike Cordano, and that's Femi Adedoyin in the middle. We all come from different backgrounds of life, and we all have different majors. So as we work together, like we believe that our different cultures will help us continue to succeed. Harassment and complaint procedures. So this is a very in-depth procedure. So as we continue to go through this, like it all starts at the top. So you want to reach the person at the top first. So basically like the head of HR or like the board of directors, and also apply yourself a lawyer, because without a lawyer, there's a good chance you won't win. So these are the different outcomes. So basically from the start, you basically, there's an allegation of like a report, and then that can get nixed. If there's an actual investigation, that can get nixed. And then if it goes all the way through, it can go to court cases or just like litigation. So Gretchen Carlson versus Roger Ailes is a very big case. If you don't know who Roger Ailes is, he was the CEO of Fox, and he got accused multiple times of sexual harassment, but she was one of the ones that definitely got away with $20 million. If you don't know the person on the right of the screen, this side, I believe, it's Isaiah Thomas. He was the head basketball coach of the Knicks for a long time. And then Anucha Brown Sanders, she was an executive of the Knicks. He called her slander words, which I won't say, but like she then won a lawsuit against the Knicks for $11.5 million. In this situation, this is actually happening right now in North Jersey, because the kid that's in the wrestling segment is suing the coach because he believes that he sexually touched him, and the procedure is still going on, but there's definitely different things that need to get worked out there. And then like complaints. So inside of different organizations that I've worked in, like different employees will complain about you, whether you're getting too far on top of them, or like they don't like the way you talk to them at different times, which at times it could just be like a miscommunication. So complaints they have a very different way of like coming across. You ready? Everybody?
This happens. I don't know how to fix it. So that's all you do. All right, I'm Jake, and
you guys press play.
you have to press play. All right. I'm Jake. I'm going to be talking about workplace safety, and if this slide will change, we'll eventually get to workplace safety, or not. I guess we reset to 20 seconds. That's annoying. All right, so workplace safety. My name's Jake. I'll be talking to you about it. It's kind of in the name, workplace safety. I'm going to be talking about how employers keep their employees safe. First thing I'm going to bring up is OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They basically set all the guidelines and the rules and policies that officers have to follow. Another thing that has to do with OSHA is that they like to globalize. They form like alliances with other countries, and they help them out in different ways about the regulations and codes that go on in their facilities. The next thing I want to talk about is drug-free workplaces. A lot of businesses are expected to keep a drug-free workplace. This includes, marijuana, alcohol, other drugs. This is to prevent drug use, not to, catch people doing drugs and get them in trouble. And another thing that ties into this is the Drug-Free Workplace Act of 1988. This adds this into employee contracts. So you sign basically saying you won't do drugs. And if you get caught, you get fired or sent to rehab. The next thing I want to talk about is the smoke-free workplace, which is essentially the same as drug-free, except it's not illegal. But there's regulations in workplaces where you cannot smoke, but there are designated smoking areas for employees, which lets you smoke. The benefits of having a smoke-free work environment is that it could help people quit, which is really beneficial. It also helps reduce secondhand smoke, which also benefits the safety of others, and it reduces the healthcare costs of a business. Now, workplace violence prevention is a big one because nobody wants to get kicked in the face in their office or something, but employers do a really good job because of the regulations and policies in place, which include, training and stuff. And it's the goal of employers to protect their employees. And one way to do this is training, obviously. They have, trainings, they come to meetings, meet with the whole team, and they give them the rundown of what happens when you get a little violent in the workplace. So that brings up zero tolerance policies. And this is also in the name. If you hit or attack or harass somebody, there's zero tolerance for it. You will get fired or punished in a different way. Now, companies have a commitment to safety, and they have to oblige to that commitment, and they are required to keep the workplace as safe as possible for their employees. Next thing is fire safety, and this happens everywhere, including schools, fire drills. We got fire alarms in place, which are supposed to be there. You're also supposed to have access to fire extinguishers to prevent any fires. You also have to have first aid in your building. And what just happened? It's out of sync. But you're required to have first aid in your building for obvious reasons. If you get hurt, you got to patch yourself up. Got to keep working. The next thing is write-ups. And that's when your boss, he doesn't like something that you do something stupid, you get written up. It's to prevent you from doing it in the future. And it keeps a record of whatever you did. The next thing is emergency situations. That could be like a tornado, power outage, building's on fire, you got to get out, cancel work. Now I want to talk about a little something that happened over the past few summers. I work as a teaching assistant for a special ed school called New Bridges in Paramus. It's north. But we have a ton of procedures we have to follow because we are working with special ed students. And they provide us self-defense classes and stuff and all these different procedures and everything. Because Roadrunner is one of the code names that we use when a student runs away. We have to fill out forms, and then basically everyone chases after the kid. Yeah, so they taught us self-defense. They brought in first aid instructors to teach us how to deal with seizures, etc., like that. And emergency closings are also a big part of business policies because snow days come up, flooding, stuff like that. But communication is the key thing because if you don't have a policy in place for communication and to do all that stuff, you're not going to get the word out. And now I want to hand it off to Dylan with employee relations.
Hey guys, I'm Dylan. I'll be talking to you about employee relations, touching on topics such as personnel files access, work hours, overtime, the Fair Labor Standards Act, and breaks. So employment classifications, there's part-time, full-time, and temporary. Temporary are usually outsourced by the company through a temp agency, and they don't receive benefits to the company. Part-time, they work under 40 hours, receive no benefits. Full-time, they do receive benefits, and that's usually when the executives work, the majority of the people. So work hours, everyone knows that 40-hour work week, that's the typical work week. Anything over 40 hours, overtime. Certain occupations have a restriction on hours, such as this one factory I worked in, they would only allow us to work 60 hours a week. That was just because compensation purposes. The jobs such as people that fly airplanes and trains, they have restrictions on the hours they can work. Drivers carrying property can work 11 hours max consecutively and 10 hours consecutively off.
Is it possible that your computer's going to sleep?
Yeah, that's why it's
happening.
happening. I just didn't want to stop the whole thing. But I can prevent that right now.
And like once it happened, like it was out of sync. It was going a little faster on there than up there, so it was kind of messed up.
Yeah, that was. So over the weekend, I had 2 12-hour shifts, and they didn't supply any really rest breaks in between because they don't have to. I worked 1 to 1, and then I had to drive an hour at 4 a.m. to get to my work. So there's no law requiring organizations to provide employees with a break for meals, rest, no matter how many hours they consecutively work. Although a reasonable expectation is that the corporation you work for in the future will supply breaks, whether it be 10 minutes, 30 minutes for lunch. Most employers like to keep that in their mindset, to keep their employees working at maximum efficiency. So, since there is no federal law requiring organizations to do it, they take it upon themselves, usually a policy in the employee handbook, or they'll tell you some days, like when I worked in the glass factory, they would give us 30-minute breaks if it was too hot outside because it would get over 100 degrees inside. So overtime is when someone works usually minimum 8 hours a day or more, and they exceed 40 hours in the work week. The Fair Labor Standards Act requires companies pay at least time and a half regular pay rate for these employees. Different states vary. There is mandatory overtime, and I experienced that at the glass factory I worked at. They required us to do 8 hours of overtime a week. Some occupations are exempt from this, such as nurses and those drivers that I was talking about earlier. The FLSA is the Fair Labor Standards Act. It establishes the minimum wage, record keeping, child labor standings. It affects private, public sectors, and the minimum wage in other states varies, but must be at least the federal amount. Okay. Yeah, we get back to it.
Yeah, now it's just not connecting.
What's that?
It said it just won't connect. It says it's already being used by somebody. That's me.
Try something in the cupboard.
Oh, one day.
201A. Sorry.
Gotta go back one. Yeah. So personnel files, only limited people have access to these, such as the head of the human resources department, CEOs, executives. Employers must keep their files for at least 5 years on each employee. That's just a federal law. And so employment separation is when the at-will agreement between an employee and the company is terminated. It could be terminated by either party at any point. That's what the at-will means. And upon termination, employees are often required to give the employer the passwords to the softwares and the company records that they use throughout their time. So wrongful termination is simply just a breach of contract by the employer. It'll get companies in a lot of legal matters, as it has in the past and will in the future. You can't fire employees for such as when they complain to OSHA about company violations, whether it is in violation or not. They have the right to call OSHA. So employers can terminate employees based on simple things such as they could be just a Giants fan or you just don't like them for any other reason. But they can't fire them for protected class reasons. Those are race, color, national origin, religion, sex, everything up there. Those are protected classes. So these protected classes, obviously you guys know why they are protected, because people will fire them. You know, there are racists out there, people that don't like the sexual orientation, age. There's plenty of reasons to fire someone, and this has gotten companies in a lot of trouble in the past, such as McDonald's and Airbnb. So paychecks, we all know what a paycheck is. They take withdrawals out of it. Organizations are under no circumstances allowed to withhold a total final paycheck on an employee. Typically, employees get paid bi-weekly, weekly. Employers can be late when they pay you, but they cannot be consistently late. In that case, you can go to OSHA and work stuff out with them. There's no federal law specifying the time of future payments, so it's just agreed upon in the contract when you're hired. Usually the employer will tell you a reasonable accommodation. So employing relatives, most business leaders will tell you this is a terrible idea, but I mean, it could work out, who knows. Most companies apply something called an anti-nepotism policy. That's when if two relatives are working within an organization, it prohibits one relative from supervising another because of the possible favoritism. So pay deductions, we've all seen in our paychecks, state tax, Medicare, Social Security. I work in Philly, so they take twice as much out because they like to take the Philly tax out, FICA, federal income tax. These are just typical things that they like to take out of our paycheck. So, conclusion, the employee relations is an important aspect of the organization because it will help the company thrive, and I'll pass it on to Tim.
All right, guys, I'm Tim, and I'm going to be talking about workplace guidelines today. basically workplace guidelines is rules that as an employee you have to follow when you're in the work setting. The guidelines I'm going to be talking about are attendance, job performance, outside employment, dress and grooming, social media acceptable use, bulletin boards, solicitation, communication tools. So for attendance, all employees are expected to arrive on time, ready to work. Every day they're scheduled to work. An employee who misses work only has one excuse for it, and is that's when you have an emergency. And you still have to contact your employer that you're going to be missing work. So my personal statistic about attendance is that I have nearly perfect attendance with my my schoolwork. I've only missed one day of class in college, and that's because I was in Tampa, Florida. My work, I've never missed a day of like work in my life. So that's just something I stress on, but it's respect to the employer. For job performance, it's communication between employees and supervisors. It's a discussion regarding how you're doing during your job, like feedback and constructive criticism. They could talk about raises, terminations, but most commonly it is the constructive criticism. Your supervisor usually puts out a set goals for you during these job performance evaluations that can be met during the month or year. Some goal examples would be hit a certain amount of sales, receive a high score on customer service scale, get more involved with coworkers. And if these goals are met, there's usually a raise at the end of it. The dress code for jobs are required for every different job. So, for example, in this picture, from a medical job, a nurse usually has to wear scrubs because it's for sanitation reasons in the hospital, while a business person has to wear a shirt and tie for potential networking and to look professional. Not only do you have to dress in a proper manner, but you have to have good hygiene too. Nobody wants to like sit next to the smelly worker in the office. It's kind of gross. It also drives away customers if your salesperson smells horrible. In every workplace, there's a bulletin board in the break room, and they have to post government postings on there, which requires minimum wage, employee rights, safety issues, etc. Employees can also put leisure activities on there. For example, like your child's like fundraiser for school. Company communication tools. Companies provide employees they usually provide them with a phone, a computer, and email. But these communication tools should only be used for during work hours for like office things, not for leisure activities. And if you are caught doing it for leisure activities, the employer has full right to investigate your computer if you're looking at sketchy websites. Can result in immediate termination. So you just have to be respectful about it. Next one is solicitation, which is basically a distraction during work. Workers who engage in solicitation usually are distracted by a coworker who is talking about stuff you don't really need to know, like their son's high school play. Like no one needs to know that. For outside employment, it's when you're working a second job in the work field, and you can do that, but you can't like interfere with your primary job. So you have to just put your priorities first. So my personal story relates to outside employment because this past summer I worked 3 jobs at the same time. I interned at Surgical Center of South Jersey with firsthand working with the administrator. I caddied during the weekends, and I was a busboy at night. So it was a lot to juggle, but I managed. It came with a lot of stress though, but it did come with a lot of money. So it made my bank account skyrocket, but there was a lot of stress involved. Waking up at 7 a.m. for 7 days a week was kind of rough. But it also helped me gain a lot of experience and network during my internship, especially meeting a bunch of people during conferences. So for social media usage, companies actually encourage an employee to use social media because it helps with advertisement of companies, especially, I mean, if you keep it in reason, like if you're going off topic and doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing at work, it really isn't acceptable. That's what brings me to off-duty and on-duty use of social media. For off-duty use, that's when you're using your own devices, your own time for leisure activities. For on-duty, that's when your manager specifically gives you guidelines of what you should be doing with the social media. For example, like advertising on Twitter or something like that for your company. You need to have respect for using social media. Your manager is expecting you to represent the company during work hours and off work hours. So if you use ethnic slurs, personal insults, obscenity, use of language that may be conducted as inflammatory, it's a violation. Also, if you're posting something online because you represent your company, so you have to post a disclaimer with it saying basically the views expressed on this website are mine alone and do not necessarily reflect the views of my employer, just so it's a warning that like your company isn't involved in it. For social media competition, social media is a powerful tool, so it's very like a touchy subject because you can use it for negative and positive ways, but a company never wants to see you trash your competition because it looks childlike and unprofessional. So the discipline of these guidelines is if you violate any of these, it can lead to immediate termination, suspension, anything like that. And now I'm going to pass it on to Christian.
Hi, I'm Christian, and I'll be talking about time off and leaves of absence. So, time off and leave of absence. So, many municipalities and states have relation laws in relation to leave of absence, and many jobs have paid time off that include family, medical leave, small necessity leaves, etc. And there's certain rules and guidelines when it comes to taking off time of leave. And so holidays. So companies allow time off for major holidays. In addition, if the holiday is on a Sunday, they'll celebrate on the preceding Friday or the following Monday. The company has the right to pay eligible employees if they qualify or if they believe they do. So full-time employees are eligible for holiday pay. Hourly workers become active after being with the company for more than 3 months. Salaried employees receive immediately among joining the company, and part-time and summer employees are eligible are not eligible. So holiday pay, time off of leave for religious holidays. Holidays are considered as 8 hours worked for an hourly worker, and for computing the overtime, holiday hours should depend on the employee working a full shift on the workday and the following shift following the holiday. Exceptions are ill with a doctor's note or a proof of being on vacation, etc. Vacation. So employees who need or companies know the importance of taking time off from work and relaxing and spending family time. So many companies incorporate a paid vacation throughout the year, at least one. And full-time employees part-time employees who work 20 or more hours a week will be eligible for paid vacation after a certain amount of time on a rational schedule. Employees must complete up to 6 months of employee for vacation time, and employees should submit their vacation plans at least 4 weeks in advance and of the requested date. And vacation can go from 1 full day of work up to 2 weeks. Companies also provide full-time, regular time, and part-time sick leave. Employees become eligible after a certain amount of days work for sick days. They are not used for substitute vacation days, but they may be used if they needed to help a fellow employee or family member provide for care, and or use these time off to schedule medical procedures, and they must notify their employer of advanced treatment and over a day of absence. Also, many companies have to abide by the Federal Family Medical Leave Act, which requires employees to grant unpaid leaves of absence and for workers with certain medical and family-related issues. It means that employees can leave up to 12 weeks for unpaid to care for a spouse, pregnancy, or serious health conditions. And companies realize that people are always going to have to miss time due to responsibility and complications, and companies respect that things can happen at any given day. The Federal Family Leave Act is a special leave entitlement that permits eligible employees to take up to 26 weeks of leave to care for a covered service member during a single 12-month period. The leave applies if the military or if the employee is the spouse, son, daughter, parent, domestic partner, or next kin of a covered military service. And employees must continue their health benefits on the FMLA, which is which you must still pay while you're at work, and you're responsible for your portion of the premium, and you must pay to understand or to get what you pay for. Employees are also protected while on leave. Both federal and applicable state laws require that the employees must return to his job once he's off the leave and can receive an extension under the Americans Disability Act. Companies also support military obligations on employees and grants leaves of service with accordance with I did say that. If you do have to go on military obligations, you must notify your HR supervisor, and if you can't, you have to get a family member to do so, and you still retain employment rights up to 5 years after of absence. If employees work 3 months or more, they may take up to 3 days of paid leave upon death of an immediate family member. Where all regular full-time employees can take up to an extra day off, 8 hours, with 1 day of pay to attend an extended family member's bereavement. And if employees support to attend their civic duty, they value that you take responsibility in your community to go out and vote, and that you do it on your own time. But if you need exceptions made, they will work with you. And companies value it as like part of the community, as I said earlier, and they should find a way to get there outside of the workplace. In conclusion, company policies are established rules of contact within the organization, and they outline the employees' and employers' responsibilities. They also protect the rights of workers and the business interests of employers. And policies, they are important in every company because they reinforce and clarify the standards that are expected of employees, and it helps managers more effectively determine what is acceptable and what is right and wrong, and it backs up the employers so they're protected on certain guidelines. And that's it.
Okay, guys, for the activity for today, go ahead and write that policies presentation. Jim?
That's why I got with
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't think that my computer doesn't go to sleep. It just dims out for 15 minutes.
It dims?
And then it'll go to sleep because that's when the password's required. Because that happened to him in between his thing, and it was completely lit up. So I have no idea.
So don't exactly know. Oh, I gotta turn off that.